Congressman Issa, always great to talk to you.
Well, Ginny, thanks for having me on, and thanks for covering Fast and Furious and our continued attempts to try to get to the truth.
And you say continued attempt, and it has been a tough one and continues to be, as you said. I mean, you're still struggling to get documents, some 80,000 documents, and what does your committee have, 6,000 of them?
Well, yeah, we have less than 10% of what the Inspector General has, and of that, about half are really related to the false letter that we received on February 4th, which now, in an extraordinary act, had to be pulled back because it was fundamentally just wrong.
Yeah. I've got to ask you, though, after last week's hearing, how much closer do you think you really are at this point to holding Holder in contempt of Congress?
Well, clearly we're close if the Attorney General keeps his promise not to deliver the information that is critical to our investigation. And I think when Patrick Meehan, former U.S. Attorney, asked him some of the most piercing questions, or Trey Gowdy asked him very legitimate questions, both these people experienced prosecutors, you could tell that what he wanted to do was stand behind some sort of a non-existent constitutional exemption from being accountable.
Yeah, because he keeps saying, this isn't about a cover-up, this isn't about special privileges, but isn't that exactly what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. The Attorney General is a little bit like the boy with his hand in the cookie jar saying, what cookie jar, what cookies? This really is very clearly a question of who knew what when, and why didn't Eric Holder know it? But more importantly, when so many people around him, key lieutenants, had the information, why is it none of them are being held accountable? The real question is, does Eric Holder simply have no credibility in holding people accountable, or is he exempting them from being held accountable because they're propping him up?
Mm-hmm. And I know you have asked Holder, and I know he was asked again during the hearing, if you would be able, and the committee would be able to speak with assistants U.S. attorneys Michael Morrissey and Ed Hurley. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I mean, he talked about Hurley and how he's a line prosecutor, and they never make line prosecutors available. Never really commented on Morrissey. But where does that put you?
Well, it puts us in a couple of positions. And one thing that may not have been very well covered, but it was there, is the question of whether we grant some sort of use immunity to Cunningham, who took the Fifth. Ultimately, we don't want to let somebody off who's done wrong. On the other hand, getting to the truth is the most important thing, not just for our committee, but for Brian Terry's family and others. So we're viewing whether or not that testimony, after we take a couple of up and down from Cunningham's testimony, would be helpful. And more importantly, policies and traditions are not always the case. A U.S. attorney is a very line person. Well, ultimately, a U.S. attorney was at the heart of this. And if the U.S. attorney gave instructions to or had things done by line attorneys, we have a right and an obligation to ask them what they knew, who told them to do what, when. And so my expectation is if we need line attorneys and we have a legitimate reason for them and we're beginning to develop some questions that we would need, we expect to have them. And our subpoenas are not invitations to negotiate. They're as binding as a federal judge's subpoena.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but Congressman Gosar wrote a commentary in the Arizona Republic about this whole issue of Patrick Cunningham pleading the Fifth. And he says, that's not the action of an innocent person who wants to clear his name or bring transparency to the matter.
Well, I think Paul is, and he's only a freshman, but boy, he gets it really, really well. The fact is that Cunningham could have come with his attorney. He could have chosen not to answer an individual question or a series of questions. We can't hold somebody accountable for what they don't answer. On the other hand, to simply take the Fifth totally is generally what mob bosses do, where they don't even want to tell you their name or where they work. And that's what he's done, is said, don't call me. I'm going to take the Fifth on everything from what is your name on.
I wanted to ask you, too, about the whole issue of wiretaps, and that the DOJ here in Washington had to approve them. They're sealed, as you guys talked about in the hearing. But, Gowdy this weekend, he was on Fox News talking about how he would be willing to bet that if you guys at the committee could get your hands on those wiretap applications, it would be crystal clear that gun walking was the tactic. What do you say? I mean, what
I
do you
think
do? You these. It all seems like very important information that you can't, or people that you want to talk to, and you can't get near it.
Well, we're going to get to the truth. One of the things that we tell everybody is we proceed at an appropriate level. We try to respect the process, but ultimately, we don't let our teeth out of the ultimate rabbit, if you will, until we get everything we want. In this case, what we know the wiretaps are going to show us is a great deal was known that would have caused this program to be shut down. A great deal was known that would have caused people to realize that much of what ATF and others were doing was unnecessary, and we expect to glean that information sooner or later. We've already had people talk to us as whistleblowers around who have seen these documents, including Kenneth Melson, a former ATF acting director, who made it very clear that although he wasn't going to give us all the details, that the details alone made him sick to his stomach because they showed him that, in fact, DEA and other organizations knew enough that much of what they were doing was unnecessary.
And you still believe Lanny Brewer's at the center of all this?
Well, maybe the top. When you get to Lanny Brewer, there's only one person left above him.
Yep.
And clearly what we see in Lanny Brewer's activity, including going to Mexico on the very day that we're getting a false letter and trying to argue for more gun walking, in this case with the Mexicans, tells us he believes strongly in gun walking as a policy. The question only was, how do you do it? And that kind of wrong-mindedness is exactly what we have to stop in the future at Justice.
You know, Congressman, I thought it was interesting because if I understood correctly, Agent John Dotson was at that hearing last week?
Yes, he was.
Why did he? Do you have any idea why he wanted to be there? Did you get a chance to talk to him after the hearing about what he thought?
Well, I invited him to come.
Yes,
he came on my request, and he came because as a whistleblower, he deserves to be treated appropriately, not ostracized, not shoved somewhere essentially off duty. He's an individual who had a stellar record. When he saw something he just couldn't live with that was wrong, he told the truth, and he, up until now, until the AG said, call me if you have a problem, I want you to be treated right, I recognize that you're a qualified whistleblower. Up until now, everyone's been sort of pretending that nothing had happened. Well, everything has happened in this man's life because he went public with something that the public deserved to know.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting during the hearing when the Attorney General said, hey, he can give me a call.
Well, I must admit that he gave a number for an assistant that he could call, not quite his number, but the thing is when you have people in organizations, and on your show a lot of times people only tell what's bad that the ATF might do. In this case, you had a number of these ATF line agents who were working cooperatively and fairly with federally licensed gun dealers and who have great respect for how they make sure that only non-criminals get weapons. And yet that story isn't being told. And so as I work with ATF agents, I try to get both sides of the story.
Yeah.
What the excesses that sometimes occur, but also when these people realize that the Second Amendment is not just a privilege or something in statute, but in fact an inalienable right, that those people also get commended for it. And Dotson was a good example of somebody who gets it, that he is overseeing what is in fact a right that is not to be taken away.
When you saw the exchanges between Holder on this whole issue about accountability, he talked about how there should be fairness, and he actually deserves to get some credit. I mean, you have Agent Terry's mother calling him a coward, saying what he's doing is a joke. He doesn't even have the common courtesy of calling her son out by name. Your thoughts? I mean, he just seems so detached. Accountability to him means shuffling the deck, moving, people around.
Well, I'll only comment on when somebody says, but all my good works. Richard Nixon did a lot of good works, including opening up China. Pete Rose did a great job for much of his career, and O.J. was an all-star football athlete. all of those people are not going to be remembered for the good deeds they did. They're going to be remembered for the terrible things they did that disgraced themselves. That's what it's all about, is that some things, in fact, you have to be accountable for what you've done wrong. And although we may try to remember and try to be fair on balance, ultimately Eric Holder is not dealing with what has been done wrong on his watch, and instead he's denied and delayed a legitimate need for an investigation, both by his IG and obviously by Congress.
Do you think you're going to still have more hearings, or are you done with that?
We will get to the truth. If a hearing helps us get to the truth, we'll do it. If a deposition helps us get to the truth, we'll do it.
On the contempt issue, though, you think you have the support of Congress?
I believe we have the support of Congress, but Ginny, one of the things we do is we go through a process. I'm not jumping to this. I put down a line in the sand for the Attorney General. He saw it. If he recognizes that he's got to cooperate at least more than he has been, we'll abate that for a period of time. But we have an obligation to get to the truth. We're not going on a fishing expedition, but we do need to seek the truth, and hopefully he got that message loud and clear.